All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. Well, greetings and welcome again, everybody. My name is Malaika Cheney Coker, and I'm the founder and principal of Ignited Word LLC, a creativity and social impact consulting firm based in Atlanta, Georgia. And our event today is From Diaspora to Domestic Philanthropy, New Funding Sources for Global Development. And it's a part of Ignited Word's Make Opportunity a Horse, Not a Unicorn campaign, which is based on the idea that opportunity doesn't have to be rare if you are creative and proactive. Opportunity, in this case, being the unicorn. I'm so pleased and excited to have as our special guest today Oxfam America's Chief Innovation Officer and also an ongoing collaborator at Ignited Word, Dr. Latte Lawson-Lartego. Latte and I have a conversation planned for you today. We'll have a little back and forth interview, and we will be looking out for your questions and excited to have them. So please do place those questions in the chat and we will get to them towards the end of the conversation. And just so you know, Lathi and I go a while back, starting with our days working at Care USA in the Atlanta office. And that honestly seems like another lifetime ago. It's been a number of years, but who's counting? Latte, since then, you have added even more skill sets to your already very stuffed roster of skills. So, to summarize for our audience, you are a resource person in innovation, social enterprises, leadership in nonprofits, change management, and on thematic issues such as economic development, financial inclusion, food and nutrition, climate change, gender. Yeah, my jaw is practically tired listing all of those. And we even have a slide which shows some of Latte's the innovations that he award-winning initiatives that he has championed during his career, if you were curious. But Latte, yeah, those days, those seemingly long ago care days, I'm sure you remember them well, even though we were, we're just a few years older since those days. Um,
Yes, I
and
do.
sorry, go ahead.
I say I do. I do remember those days at Care of floor. Yep.
Yes, yes. And I should note for our listeners that you are based in DC these days. So Salatya, as you know, one of the reasons why we wanted to do this event is because you had written this blog, which was a very timely piece, posted on Oxfam's platform, and that you shared, and that to me was just a breath of fresh air and a much needed sort of piece of guidance in these very turbulent times that have so many of us scratching our heads. And in preparing for this event, I was going back and reading the blog again and just noting how rapidly things have been changing. So the blog was published in March, and when you wrote it, you were advocating for USAID to stand strong. And today we know that there's not much left of USAID. It's what remains of it is renamed, being subsumed in the state departments, etc. And of course, as we know, and as you mentioned in your blog, USAID is not the only major government funder that's shifting or reducing its commitments. What are some of the other changes you've witnessed since you wrote the blog?
Thank you, Malaika, for the introduction, and greetings to everyone who took the time to join us today for this conversation. obviously would love to hear your thought as well, and hopefully get some takeaways from this exchange. Yeah, so I wrote that blog actually late February, published it in March because I was coming back from a trip in Senegal where I'm part of a change process as Oxfam. We have been also decentralizing our offices and all we embrace the localization agenda, right? So I'm working with our office in Senegal, where now they're becoming a local a national organization, right? So it was really top of mind at that time, just seeing the change with USID, which sadly is yeah, USID shut down. But now is not just USID actually. So USID budgets as of fiscal year 24 was close to 32 billion, right? And now what they have left is about 83% cut in the US aid budget. So, and as you said, is being folded into the State Department. There is a new appropriation ongoing. We don't know how much the new administration will be spending, but it's going to be much, much less. So currently it's 83%, as you can see. And we saw many other countries, especially in Europe, right, who are following the same path, mostly driven by also the geopolitics in Europe, the war between Ukraine and Russia. So UK, you can see UK has reduced by 40%, right, which is about 6 billion reduction. So then you see Netherlands as another one, 30% reduction, because they also wanted to shift more into um, uh, looking at how they can use aid to align it with their government agenda. So it's up over 1 billion euro over 5 years. France is another one. It's about 37%, as you can see. So yeah, I mean, you see a lot of donor countries, Belgium, Germany, about 50%. So it's quite dramatic for our sector, right? What we do, and yeah, as I put in the blog, is a wake-up call as well for us to rethink what we do, how we do it, and how do we innovate so we can, because the fight we are fighting is not going away. So how do we continue to reinvent ourselves to be able to work on our mission, right? Reducing poverty, reducing inequality, fighting the climate change issues, and more.
Mhm. That graph you just talked us through is so eye-opening because while I guess those of us working on the American side of global development are quite focused on USAID, and of course, in terms of shared dollars, USAID was by far the biggest donor, and also in terms of the proportion of the cuts, it made the greatest cuts, but these are all really dramatic cuts too from other major donors. And I think the point is clear that taken as a whole, this is a really comprehensive financial setback to global development funding. But that really does bring us to the spirit of your piece, is what doors does this open up, and what does this require of us to adjust and create a new future? In fact, the opening premise of your piece is that we as a global development sector must change, adapt, and innovate. So before we get into the specifics, can you please explain a bit more about that sort of call to action that you've given?
Definitely. Again, as I said earlier, the issue, right? Some of us have been working in this sector for a long time. We are passionate. We know why we are here, right? So inequality is widening, right? We have many people struggling. We are facing multiple, right, intersecting crises, conflict, like when you take country like Sudan, or Gaza, or climate change. Those are really among the most urgent issues, right? So the needs are growing rapidly. And for me, there's no doubt about the importance of our mission, right? We are, most of us working in this space, a mission-driven organization. And that's why many of us already chose this path in the first place, right? So, however, as we just share it, the support system is shrinking. Funding is shrinking at an alarming rate, I would say, right? So to achieve our vision of a more equal, just world, right? I think the place for non-profit organization like us, Oxfam, or many more, the lack of care, but more and more organization in the global south, right? I think there's, for me in my mind, there's no question why those organizations should continue, right? Also because of the retraction from government. So I think for me, the why, the raison d'être of those organizations is very clear, right? There's a need. However, we can no longer do what we do, right? We can do business as usual, right? That's why in my blog I was calling for, we need to adapt. We have to adapt. We have been adapting, right? I think the sector as we know it from like 20 years ago is not the same, and is yeah. So that need to continue, that the adaptation, but also the innovation in terms of how we work, right? What we work on, and even how do we tell our story, right? Storytelling, how do we tell better story that really bring people in, that is not so much intellectual, but is really helping people to really understand why we are here, right? Uh, but I would also say innovation means sometimes we fail, right? How do we tell stories about where we are failing, right? And what we are learning from that failing, right? How do we build maybe stronger partnerships, right, with maybe unlikely partners? So I think that's, for me, that's a call to action. We cannot afford to continue with business as usual. And this applies not only to what we do, but how we do it and how we fund our work. So that's the premise of my blog, and it's been yeah, on top of my head since then.
And one other thing that caught my attention in your blog is that you called out Global South civil society organization specifically, which to me is very telling because so much of the critique of aid as usual, the current status quo model is that it's so some call it neo-colonial, very global north up, global south down. So that caught my attention. Could you say a bit more, please?
Certainly, yeah. Again, as I said, I wrote this blog on my way back from Senegal, where we were in the process of setting up a national organization there, right? Because obviously, while the pullback in funding from Western countries is affecting all major international organizations, right, to varying degrees, the real impact is mostly felt at the local level, right? In countries like Senegal, or in countries like Mali, or Kenya, or South Africa, and that's where we can see the impact. Obviously, here in the US, or eventually in Europe, people will lose jobs. People are losing their jobs, which is very sad. People who devoted their life, but the real impact of these cuts is at the local level, right? In communities across low income and conflict-affected countries, right? So programs such as like girls' education, right, allowing girls to be able to go to school, program like helping a small-scale farmers, especially women, to really be able to grow food and connect to markets. HIV and AIDS, right? Nutrition schools, school meal programs, and we work on all those issues. Water safety, or water security for household, things like that. So people, real people, women, men, young girls, young boys, people at the local level are being affected by this cut, right? So that's why in the blog I call out local organization, in our organization in the global south, because at the end of the day, they are closer to the action, right? They are closer to the struggle of those people. And also for Oxfam and our sector, I think we have been on this journey of, how do we decolonize the way we do our work? How do we promote more? Here we call it the local humanitarian leadership, and we saw that during COVID as well, right? When the world's, quote unquote, has stopped, people cannot travel, people on the front line who were helping communities are local people, right? Local leaders. So I think this is more reason to call out organization the global south, because um, what they do is extremely critical, and for them to rethink, right, how they source their funding. Many of them have like partnership with international organization. They go for bids, contract together, but those things are going away. So it's ready for them to think about how they can continue to exist and have impact. So yeah, that's why I call them out more specifically, because I hope this is helpful for them, and obviously love to hear their thoughts and see how we can also share knowledge and our own capabilities in the global north with them.
Hmm. That is so interesting. And it reminds me of, I was also in Senegal in April, and there was a project that we saw on a trip, which was where they had involved adolescent girls in being champions of ecological awareness in their community in rural Senegal. And a part of it had been funded by the US government through the US Embassy. And in January, like so many other organizations affected by the stop work orders, they got a letter from the embassy saying essentially stop the project. So we went to this area, which was the gathering spots for the the clubs, the eco clubs, and there were like rows of seedlings which were dead, or almost dead. And there were so many of the things that the team were pointing to and saying, "Oh gosh, you should have come some months ago. This was green, thriving." And as we, went around the community, we could see how urgent the awareness raising was. It was an area suffering from deforestation, desertification. The adolescent girls have been doing a lot to like get their parents more aware of everything from like more ecologically friendly farming methods to health, more safe alternatives to use to some personal products. And the conversation had started to move towards, well, just because they said they weren't going to fund it doesn't mean the work isn't needed. It has to happen. It's urgent. We have to figure out how we can continue this. So everything you just said really reminds me of the kind of like at the point of need, it somehow has to continue, and we need to be rethinking, or local organizations are at the crux of rethinking how do we still move forward these objectives? How do we meet these very pressing needs in our communities? Um, so yeah,
Okay.
that's
Totally. Yeah, yeah. And again, for me, is also just because of what the issues we see in many of those countries. If, there was an article, if government were able to fulfill their own mandate, right? Their responsibility vis-a-vis their citizens. If they were, I think we'll get into that. But so how do we generate resources locally to be able to do that? Yeah. So because those needs are still there and they are not going away totally.
Exactly, exactly, which is a great segue to the actual solutions you propose. So let's go to them. In brief, you outline um, one, strengthening domestic resource mobilization at national and subnational levels. Two, engaging the diaspora. Three, expanding social enterprises. Four, public fundraising and domestic philanthropy. Five, strengthening private sector and corporate partnerships. And six, leveraging pooled philanthropic funding. I feel like it's at a time of so much gloom and feeling down about things. It's almost like a box of chocolates of promising solutions and ways forward. So please tell us it is that box of chocolates. Um, and I know we have to, we maybe we can sort of like direct attention to specific ones, and I guess what's most top of mind for me is which of these ideas do you feel are like most immediately actionable, or have you already seen in action? I know many of these are not new solutions per se, but yeah, which of these do you think are like more, yes, we can hit the ground running and they're already well advanced and to some degrees in implementation?
Yeah, yeah. Those again, those are not prescriptions, right? Those are, been in this sector for over 2 decades, and I'm sure for many organizations in the global south, these are not new either, right? But it's just an opportunity to re-emphasize them and hopefully to bring them front and center for these decision makers, leaders in non-profit organization. So yes, I think not all of them could be, implemented or executed very, very fast, but I think some may need more work, but some could, could start. I won't say immediately, but they will need some organization and adjustments. So obviously, for me, one that I'm really excited about to explore more is how do we engage the diaspora? Right? I'm sure you see yourself as part of the diaspora. I'm like, I see myself as part of the diaspora, born in Africa, living here in the US. Yeah, so the question is always how do we contribute as well, right? How do we give back, right? But doing that is how do you do it in a way that protects your donation, right? Is not is used appropriately, right? So I see this and diaspora community either from Africa, West Africa, East Africa, Southern Africa, wherever, in Asia, Latin America, MENA. I think they are all really, those communities remain deeply connected, right, to their countries of origin, right? They send money, remittances to their home country, to their loved one, and some use that for development opportunities as well. I think the statistic is, and as I put in my blog, over 857 billion, right, in global remittances when you look at 2023. So just that's quite huge, right? And then I try to look at, okay, how does this compare to the USID budget, which is about 21 times, right, the budget. So it's huge. We know not all of them goes to what we do, but for me that presents quite a potential, right, for organization in the global south to really think about how they can engage the diaspora, whether Senegalese diaspora, or you are in Benin, or you are in Kenya, or Mali. And here in the US, I've known many diaspora organizations. People are organized. They organize at city level or maybe at the states. level or even federal, right? You have a lot of diaspora organization also who really want to do, to contribute, as I said earlier. So those diaspora people are highly motivated to support causes in their home countries. But I think organizations need to study them carefully because, diaspora are also not an homogeneous group, right? You have different kind of, maybe philosophical stance or giving opportunities, capabilities. So yeah, I think they need to be studied carefully to understand who is who, what motivates them, how do they want to be involved, right? Because some may want to be more just give you my money and send me a report. Some may need more hands-on, right? They want to be part of the decision making, right? So I think, yeah, taking the time to really segment them, study them, see what they want, how they want to engage, and then as an organization, what is your value proposition to them, right? Are you creating maybe some kind of advisory group for diaspora to be part of that, so they can also have visibility into your organization? Are you bringing them more transparency, right? Accountability in how funding are used? Are you bringing them more impact stories? So you really have to think about how you want to engage the diaspora. But I think I see that as quite an opportunity to leverage. And then there are a lot of different ways. Again, I put that in my blog, how we can engage diaspora in a very creative way. There are crowdsourcing opportunity. Um, and when I was doing my research, I also came across this platform called Kwanda, which is innovative digital platform that brings diaspora who want to engage in Africa together, and they can. It's still nascent, but there are opportunities like that, right? So how do we leverage technology to really catalyze the diaspora and mobilize funding to achieve the goal of the organization. So I see that as high potential. Eh, Definitely, anything high potential will need work and also, but I believe this is something organization in the global south could tap and experiment something. If it works, see how they can refine and scale. But definitely, I think the stat is about 40 million people from origin from Africa living in diaspora, either in Europe or here in the Americas, somewhere in Asia, right, or Australia. So there are a lot of people, 40 million people who could be allies for those organizations. I think the second one is public fundraising, right, and domestic philanthropy. I think there is again there are people in Africa, in Senegal, or in Mali, in Burkina Faso, wherever we are thinking about in South Africa, Kenya, etc., right? Who are also wealthy enough to contribute, right? But most of the time, I think is again the trust issue, right? The trust issues, maybe value proposition as well for organizations like us to really gain their trust, right? I think as we are seeing it, many organizations are also trying to really set up a strong boards, set up like what we call like leadership council, people within the local community who can really step up and be an ambassador for that organization. So I see opportunity there as well, right? And another opportunity there is also, here in the US we have, I don't know whether we'll continue to keep those things, but the charity navigator and the tax incentive, right? So whereby people can even give and deduct that from the annual tax. So things like that could be ways to create a more enabling policy environments where individual within those community or even corporate etc cool could donate to non-profit in the global south, right? So I see that as an opportunity. Maybe the third one, and I will stop here, is also the private sector, right? More and more, we see obviously here in the US and in Europe, corporate are becoming more aware of their corporate citizenship or of their reputation, their footprints. So, and as they have also subsidiaries in Africa, for instance, or emerging national, corporate as well are trying to take the same pathways in terms of how they can become more socially responsible, right? How they can do the right thing, making money, but also doing good to societies. So is there an opportunity there as well, right? For non-profit to explore a bit more this kind of corporate partnerships. Obviously, there are risks in terms of greenwashing, but I'm sure there are also good organizations, good companies with good leadership who have good vision. Because I've reviewed a paper in China. They've done a study where they found that Chinese companies with leadership who, like, if you have lead like, let's say your executive team is from that region, they are most likely to to invest, to give back to the community because it's their hometown, right? It's their hometown. They know they see the struggles. So there are many companies who may be willing to do that, and that's where nonprofit also can maybe have a more value proposition. How do they structure those programs so that it's not just, hey, let's go build this school here, let's go, dig this well here, but it's really a well thought out proposition that they can co-create together and continue to, to have funding for to tackle inequality, to reduce poverty, to change those systemic issues in society. So I see that as another opportunity. Yeah, I think there are many, but those will be the three that could be done fairly quickly with the right team, the right strategy, and the right approach.
That is so much food for thought and so many points, things were going off in my head as you were speaking. To me, a lot of it comes down to rethinking the mental images we have of, for example, who is a donor or who is a corporate partner. Like when I was thinking about what you were saying about diaspora, I think about sort of the mental images we have of some of the traditional aid donors, individual donors, and we might think about some older individual that, remembers this organization's ties to World War II, or we might think of some high net worth individual that just feels like they have to do something for whatever the issue is, like sustainable agriculture or women's rights or whatever. Maybe, they're very tied to these issues personally, but they're Westerners. And I think you're helping really enlarge sort of or give a better sense of the opportunity, but not just the opportunity, but the need to rethink who is a donor in the case of diaspora, because yes, I am part of the African diaspora and also the Asian diaspora, and at first I was thinking, a lot of it is everybody's used to like, oh, well, sending some money to ex-relative or whatever that personally, and it's a sort of a family within the family kind of thing. But then I also realized and remembered, well, I am part of like a WhatsApp group from my primary school, like essentially elementary school, and it's a pretty active group. And these are people that live overseas, and they talk about, well, I was just there, or some people in the group are still in Sierra Leone, and they report to members of the group in Europe or the US or Asia or wherever and say, the conditions in the school are X. We should think about, you know, doing something or other. And that something or other in the mind of the group. They toss around everything from, well, we should talk to the school administration and see what they think. We don't want to just send money, but obviously sending money is on the table. So definitely resonate with your point about we have to understand these diaspora groups. They're not homogenous. They all have different interests. Some want to write checks only and be done with it. Some want to, be civically involved somehow. But I think it's a point well taken about giving proper attention to engaging with diaspora groups and realizing too that it's not just they have appetites to give beyond just to their relatives. And I think same for corporate engagement. Like a lot of times, the template that I think we have is some big multinational corporation like Nestle that, has a very complex value chain and how you can influence them to change that value chain to the benefit of X communities. But what I hear from you is thinking about some of the local companies and domestic companies
Totally.
in
Yeah.
countries or in regions of countries that have participation and ownership in the community, and that would have strong motivations to demonstrate partnership
Yeah.
with those local areas. So I think these are very interesting models for us to
Yeah.
images
Yeah.
for us to rethink.
Totally, totally. And also maybe finding way to educate them, right? Because some may not be, that may not be part of their plan yet, but I think nonprofit will also have responsibility to educate those leadership within those companies so they understand their role. There are a lot of template now. There are, regulation, that, yeah. So I think there's opportunity to even influence policy for corporate to be transparent on this, and educate them, find a way. So I think, yeah, again, that's why innovating is really key, and creativity. How do we do those things and bring those people at the table so we can co-create something together with them. So I see a lot of opportunities here for sure.
Wonderful. And I love how you've kind of given a sense of the scale of the potential of the two ideas or the two areas you've mentioned so far. I wonder if there are other ideas on the list. I know I keep calling them ideas, but like you said, these have been established practices for decades, but there is a new urgency around how much we lean into them, how innovative we are in trying to explore their full potential, etc. I wonder which other kind of areas on the list you think maybe they're more difficult, but they're also very high potential.
Yeah, but I think all the six are doable, right? The other one is how do we leverage pool fund, pooled philanthropy funding, which is your number four here. Yeah. So again, I think we here in the US, I was pleased to hear the Gates Foundation, right? Bill Gates coming out and say, look, I'm going to double down. I'm going to give myself 20 years and just close the foundation. I want to see it through myself, right? And double it down. I think about what 200 million billion. That's a lot of money for the next 20 years. So I think there are opportunities and there are many donors coming together as well. That's why for me it's kind of pulling money together, right, around some specific issues. So again, that's the role nonprofits here in the global north, but also global south could play, right? Like to for us to advocate for those big philanthropies to come together around issues so that also to avoid a lot of duplicity or duplication, right, in those pooling funding together, so that if like are we tackling girls' education, we know that those are the key donor coming together around that. And also that could also force, for me, that could force some non-profit organization also to look at partnerships, or shall we maybe even merge together, right? So we can all go around issues so that we can bring more efficiency. Why do we want to have, like, let's say you have in a given country you have 10 organizations working on get education issues, right? Is there a way they can come together and share the methodology or even merge together, right? We know the merger and acquisition a lot in the private sector, but not so much in our sector. So for me, it's also a thought-provoking idea. I say, okay, is there an opportunity for those organizations to come together a bit more to so they can go after those pool funds, or even for philanthropy to also look at how can I incentivize those more strategic partnership or even merger or acquisition, right? So they can give them that incentive to do. So I feel like that could be an opportunity. There's also more and more domestic philanthropic organization. In many countries in Africa, you have foundation merging as well, right? So I think that could be an opportunity as well. Like here, this kind of giving circle where people, pledge to give, over 90% or 99% of their worth before they die. Is there anything we can borrow and educate those people with a lot of resources, a lot of wealth on the continent in Africa, for instance, as well, right? So what's that pledge? What can that look like? Again, those things will take a bit of time, but I think those are doable. And it's also how do we call on people's like patriotic values? Say, look, you have money, you have to take care of your country. You can't just make money in this country and then ship that money, have a bank account somewhere else. How do you use that money? Hopefully made, legally to also contribute to development in your own country. So I think that's this kind of opportunity between philanthropy still in the Western countries, but also looking at ways we can continue to grow philanthropy in country like in country across Africa, etc. So I think Nigeria is a good example where you have a lot of billionaire, right? So is there a way they can also set up foundations? So I think that to me that's an opportunity to explore. And the other one that I put in the blog is social enterprises, right? This may not be for any organization because it takes a bit of skill set, but is there, look at your offering, what you offer, right? Is there any kind of skill set that you have that could be used to generate income or revenue to fuel your non-profit mission, right? So they are like, well, I mean, when you look at organizations like in Asia, BRAC or Grameen Foundation, those are huge organizations. They are multinational organization, right? But the premise, like BRAC at the beginning, the premise was already that set up a social enterprise, right? I used to work with them when I was at CARE. They have milk processing plants where they buy milk from farmers. Because they feel the void in the marketplace, right? Because there is no private investment, so they feed the void and they make money out of that, and they use that revenue to support like girls education or nutrition program in school. So it's also a different way of thinking for nonprofit to see, is there anything we do, right? Maybe they work on agriculture value chain. Is there anything that we could think of and make it more sustainable, right? More financially sustainable, right? Even Oxfam, we don't do that in the US here, but in the UK, Oxfam has those kind of, when you live in the UK, you see Oxfam store, right? It's like secondhand clothes or fair trades where people can go
Mhm.
buy those kind of stuff, and the revenue generated is invested back into the organization for our mission. So I think that's a type of thinking nonprofit can also do, to say, look, is there anything that we are good at doing, or we can maybe partner with existing organization to set up those kind of social enterprises that can continue to do good, but also make some money that can help us to at least have a core team together, right? So that core team is protected, even because we know that donor money fluctuates. We can still have those kind of unrestricted revenue to keep the light on and achieve your mission. But again, as I put in the blog, it takes skill set. I've done that with care. You really need the right skill set, the right mindsets, and manage it separately because you can't just mingle your social enterprise and nonprofits. Yeah, it can become a disaster very quickly. The last
Mm,
one, which for me is the most promising, to be frank, because we all got into this sector with the idea that, we don't want to, perpetuate this kind of work, right? We don't, like one of my colleagues at Care that time say, I don't want to see my kids do this kind of work, right? We want to be the last generation of these kind of development workers, right? But I think the issue we are facing is still deep, and we need people like us. But if government are taking their responsibilities, fulfilling their mandates, I think there should be a less need for many of non-profit doing what we do today. So domestic resource mobilization for me is key. It's difficult, but it's much needed.
mhm.
Mostly looking at how government collect. One way government collect the money is through taxation, right? And but we know in many countries, the system is not well set up. They still have a lot of informality as well. So is there a way they can think about how do they broaden the tax base? Even one of my area to test a bit more, and obviously we have some evidence, is also how do they decentralize the taxation system at, let's say, at subnational level, right? And then bring people into it, right? Like you are a homeowner, you pay your tax on your house, and you have the ability to organize yourself within the community, right? Or you are a small business owner, you have your shop, you pay your tax. So is there a way government can think outside of the box and maybe see how they can help those community who pay tax to see how the tax is used and to even have a seat at the table, right? To say, look, let's say we have a national fund for infrastructure or for school, and we'll match that with your tax. Let's say this community A, you collect, let's say $100,000, we'll match with another $100,000. You can decide how to use that, right? That will be a great incentive for those community, for those people to be able to, yes, obviously proudly pay my tax because I know the tax is used, for maybe we need the roads, we need a paved road in our community, which we don't
Which
have
also
even.
helps their business. The
Exactly,
infrastructure,
we can have
the creation
business.
of the markets, yeah, it helps their business
Exactly.
directly.
You have a
Right.
marketplace with all the infrastructure, we have a cooling place where people can put their vegetable. You have
Right.
school, you have nursery, you have daycare, right? You have park. So I think we need to think about how government can really set up the system, be more transparent, be inclusive of the taxpayer themselves, so they are part of the decision making. They can see what the tax is how the tax is used, and hopefully have the incentive. One thing I used to tell my wife, like when I used to live in Georgia, like every time I travel with care, right, you go to developing countries, you just like, okay, oh wow, man. Then you come back, you get out of the airport, and then you just drive on the paved road up to your doorstep, right? Say, at least I pay my tax here, but
Right.
I can see the
You see
tax
what it
put
goes
up,
to, right.
right? And you see a park popping up, next door. So I think we can governments, along with citizen and non-profit organization, there's a lot of possibility to really see how we can work on this domestic resource mobilization so that there's money in country to fund development, right? So that,
Mm.
yeah, we don't need to rely on, donor from the north before those countries can develop. So Yeah, so those
Right.
again is not an easy, but it's doable, and we see some good example already for that.
Right. And I was also thinking about the policy implications of domestic philanthropy also as you were speaking. So if you want to incentivize those high net worth individuals, let's say essentially like rich Africans or rich Latin Americans or whoever to make philanthropic investments, like we know how that works in a country like the United States. There are tax incentives, never mind some
Mhm.
of these things are being re-examined in current legislation, but they're currently tax incentives to make it easier to give, and there are tax breaks for nonprofits also. If you run a nonprofit, you're tax exempt. And so it makes it easier for you to use whatever revenues you have. You don't have to lose some revenues um, in tax. It can go to the mission. So that's something I also come across is like, what's the tax structure like to incentivize all kinds of investments, including philanthropic giving. So it sounds like that's
That
quite an area that, as you said, is not easy, but very necessary.
necessary,
Um,
yeah.
so we're close to the end of our time, and I just wanted to check in and see if we have any questions from any members of our audience. Please do write your questions in the chat, and we would love to hear from you and respond as best we can. And Latia, while they're doing that, maybe we can talk about the recent article, excuse me, that was in the Stanford Social Innovation Review, written by the director of the Malago Foundation, that had this to say. Essentially, it had a really provocative but necessary title about, I think it was something like Big Aid is Dead or something like that. And this excerpt struck me, which is that where this matters most, this as in, as you've been saying, realizing there is no going back, business as usual is is not happening. We need to completely rethink how we approach development. Um, and so essentially again, saying where this matters most is Africa. India declared itself independent of big aid years ago, and our own India portfolio is largely unaffected. The governments there, federal and states, have the will, the dough, and the capacity to scale up good ideas. Countries in East Asia and Latin America are in relatively good shape with tax bases that can power government action. In Africa, governments have little to spend, and in the short run, at least, these cuts are really going to hurt. So, I was also thinking and shared with you, like, I know a lot of what you've been saying is directed at Africa, all African governments, African civil society organizations, as this piece is also saying, but what are your thoughts? Do you agree? And what do you think are the implications, if any, for other parts of the world?
No, I agree. I mean, again, no, countries, a country that is responsible, right, should not depend on external, especially aids, to provide a decent living for the citizen, right? So to me, just yeah, that equation is I mean you will never be able to feel that. AIDS could be enabler, right? They could be enabler, they could help develop capabilities, but first and foremost, governments will need to step in, right? And have the clear vision and obviously develop the right plan and implement those plans too. Yeah. So yeah, I think India, obviously they have even anti non-profit law, or especially uh, international organization. They are very suspicious of them. So yeah, somehow, and the government has stepped up a lot as well. They have come up with their program like guarantee employment scheme, They have a lot of social security program for the citizen. It's not perfect. There's a lot of poverty in India for sure. We work there, but overall, you can see that the country has been growing, and you have emerging middle class, right? And India is big, they have big markets. But again, India is just one state, one country. Africa, I saw that blog, I put the comments because Africa is not one country, right? That's also the nuance that we
Right.
need to. There's a lot of countries, the context is very different. So yes, totally, but definitely Africa has still a lot to do because the debt issue is also huge, like about 1 trillion debts, right? That those countries in Africa, are dealing with. And the term
Mhm.
of those debts is not helping as well, right? So
Mhm.
I think this is just an opportunity for African states to really say, look, let's seize these moments again. Let even mobilize the diaspora. We have diaspora bonds, etc., to really see how we can put our country back on track. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we do
Yes.
have some questions that I want to make sure we get to before we close. So we have, I'll just take them all together, the two in the chat before we get to the raise hand. So we have someone wanting to know what was the name of the digital platform where diasporic organization listings? And then we have another question on any comments on tax incentives in the USA when the diaspora gives to nonprofits in developing countries.
Yeah, so that organization I came across again, I haven't done due diligence, but he's set up by a young guy. I think he lives in the UK, originally from Nigeria. It's called Kwanda. Okay, I can put that in
Spell
the
that,
chat
please.
quickly.
Yes, please.
Kwanda. Yeah, that's the name. Check it out. It's still new, I believe, newish. Yeah, but I think it can serve as inspiration, right? One other thing is a partnership we can build with those remittances organizations, the like of Western Union or the RIA, all those transfer companies.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think there's a lot to think about and to be creative and innovative. So yeah.
So,
Uh
sorry, and we also have two raised hands, so we have several questions to get to.
yeah.
So to the
So
comment on tax
there's
incentive in
no
the US.
incentive. Like if you are a diaspora, you give money back home, there's no incentive. Unless you give to a non-profit, a non tax deductible organization, then you can. But if you just send your money through those, I'm not aware of any tax incentive. I'd love to know if there's something like that, but I'm not aware. Yeah.
And that's maybe back to the question on nonprofits in the US that have can have programs directed at diaspora audiences because that would be a way that the diaspora
Yeah,
audiences could get those tax deductions through those
exactly.
nonprofits.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, so we have a hand up from Jay and then Azara. So I think I forgot that we don't have the opportunity to unmute, or I suppose we can. So may I ask um, both of you to put your questions in the chat, please?
Well, I'll just say, I raised my hand just to alert you that there were two questions in the chat. That was all.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. And so we have, I think,
Yes,
Azara had a question.
Azara, yes. I don't know. It's not a question, it's just a sort of contribution to the debate. To me, it's clear that the current trend of international aid cuts is a very great opportunity to accelerate the decolonization agenda as it will push the governments in Africa to be more accountable towards their citizen, their population. We know that Africa as a continent is not a poor one. It doesn't lack resources, natural resources to really support its development. What Africa in many, many countries lacks is more about governance, strong governance, leadership, political will for the leaders to really step in their role of ensuring that they are using the resources to build the countries. And then the fact that the US government, European governments are removing the available funding to African countries will really force, to my understanding, it will force the CSOs, the national CSOs, the population as a whole to really make the government more accountable and also take their own responsibilities uh, to increase the awareness of the citizen about their rights and what they deserve to get from the government and what they as individuals as groups they can contribute in their their living areas to build their own development path.
That's a
So
great contribution,
regarding
Azara.
the yeah.
I'm sorry, if I may, we're at time, so we have to end it there, but that is really the perfect contribution to close out our conversation. Thank you so much
Sure.
for sharing that. It's very much in line with the content of the conversation, and I can say for my part, I thoroughly agree with all of that. Um, if that is the end of our time, but if you're interested in having more of a consult with me and Latte on ways to better seize opportunity in the current landscape, whether you're working with Diaspora or an NGO or a corporation, please reach out to us at info@ignitedword.com. That's our contact information and socials on the screen. We very much look forward to keeping the conversation going because, as Latte said, the need is there. The need is growing, if anything. This is not the time to forget our duty as humanitarians and people interested in addressing social issues, reducing inequality, and all of that. So the journey continues, and the innovation is needed more so than ever. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. We really appreciate your time and participation, and we will send some follow-up content. Thanks and have a great day. And thank you so much, Latte, for your wonderful insights during this conversation.
Thank you for having me, and yeah, I hope this was insightful. And yeah, so and thank you, Azara, for that comment as well and the questions. Thank you, Malaika, for hosting me. Have a good day.